Can we talk about the 40 series from Nvidia and how it's not actually a new generation? What's up, everybody? Eric here from the Dark Hardware. Today, I'm going on a bit of a rant about how the 40 series isn't really a new generation, considering when you take in price to performance, it isn't even close. It is just an extension of the 30 series. So let's get into some of these numbers and let's take a look at why this is total BS and the 40 series is just an awful cash grab from Nvidia this time around. We'll even talk about the difference between the 16 and 12 gigabyte 4080s, which we all know is, yeah. So let's get it to the obvious one that the 4080 16 and the 4080 12 gig, not even close to being the same GPU. But if you're in the store and you're holding a box that says 4080, 4080, and one says 12 gig and one says 16 gig, and you look at the price, and one is $300 more expensive than the other, you would think, oh, really? It's just a little bit less RAM? Cool, I'll go with the $300 less one. I'll pay $900 instead of $1,200 for a 4080. But in reality, the 4080, both of them are not even close to being the same GPU. I don't even know how consumer protections even lets them call this a 4080 when it is not. You look at the specs right out, you can see the GPU name AD103 for the 4080 and AD104. This is the die name. So one, we know right off the bat, not even the same die. And then you bump down here with CUDA cores. You got 9,728 on the 16 gig. You have 7,680. You have over 2,000 less CUDA cores on the 12 gig. And then you bump down further and you look at the memory bus right here, and you have a 192 bus on the 12 gig when you have a 256 on the 16 gig. So if you're looking at these cards, they are not even close to being the same 4080 versus 4080, but 12 gig and a 16 gig. Not even close to being the same thing. $300 difference. This is where the $300 difference is. They're not the same GPU at all. They may have the same name, but they are not the same GPU. And if you're in the store looking at boxes, I bet you wouldn't even have a clue about this. So let's go on. Let's look at some of the new leaked benchmarks that include now the 4080s, plus a few of the old 30 series. Interesting, they left off the 3090. They have the 3090 Ti in here, and they left off the 3080 Ti. So we have this weird jump. It's actually two cards in between here that are missing. So one of the things here, they're showing these graphs with the DLSS, but these frames up here, especially in the DLSS 3, some of these are fake frames. They are AI generated in between the actual rendered frames. So let's actually back this off and let's look at the actual render frame performance without the DLSS. So let's remove those here, and now you get a very stark picture on what the 40 series is actually bringing to the table over the 30 series. Here we have the 3080 sitting at 37 frames, where the 4080 12 gig is giving you 46 frames, somewhere around a 20% increase. And then you have the 16 gig, a huge jump, again, another 20 frames from the 3080. You got 20 frame difference here. And then you jump all the way up to the 4090. But the big thing is, you look here at the 4080 12 gig, it doesn't outperform the 3090 Ti, which is a little bit disappointing. But let's actually look at the actual percentage and price to performance, and then we get an even more stark picture. All right, so I put together some numbers here. Up at the top, we have the performance differences between all these cards that they have: the 4090, the 24080s, the 16 and the 12, and then the 3090 Ti and the 3080. That's at the top. At the middle, you have the price differences between these cards, and then at the bottom, you have price to performance differences. And this is where we're going to be looking a lot. But as you can see here, you have the 3080. It came in as an MSRP of $700. If you want the 4080, just the 12 gig, you are going to be paying almost 29% more for the next generation, which is bonkers, because generation to generation, you should be paying either the same or less. I mean, AMD just did it with the Ryzens. The 7950 was $100 less than the 5950 was at launch. But here you're going to be paying 28% more for a generational increase, unless you consider the 4080 16 gig as the actual successor to the 3080, which I believe it is. You're going to be paying 71% more money, because you're going to be paying $500 more over MSRP of the 3080 to get the 4080 16 gig. So you're taking a massive penalty here. And if you look down at the bottom, if you have a 3080, any of these cards, you are taking a price to performance penalty. That's what these negative numbers are. So if you upgraded to a 3090 right now from a 3080, you would be taking a 25% penalty, a 25% penalty in price to performance from that card difference. If you go from the 3080 to the 3080 12, you'll get a 4% price to performance penalty. This should be completely opposite. This number right here, the 4080 16 gig to the 3080, should be more like a 25%. Like if they priced it, say, at $700, then, sorry, let me move that up here. $700, the price to performance would be a 54% uplift if they priced the 4080 16 gig at the same price as the 3080 when it launched, what its MSRP was supposed to be. Even if they say they went up $100 to $800 over the previous generation, you still would have gotten almost a 40% uplift for the same amount of money. But because they are charging $1,200 for that 4080, the next generation of the 3080, you're taking a penalty. You're paying for this performance. You're paying more for less performance based on that ratio of how much you paid versus how many frames you're going to get. That is the biggest thing. This whole thing is a lie. These 40 series cards are not the generational successors. They are just extensions of the 30 series at this point, because normally how you would go as you go higher up the stack, you're going to pay more and more for a little less performance in ratio, which is how it always is, which is fine. But generation to generation, you should be paying less, or you should be paying about the same, but you should be getting a performance uplift. But you are getting a penalty on all of these if you are starting from a 3080 and you want to go to the next generation. That is the biggest thing right here. This is naming problems. The 4080 12 gig, no, it is a 3090 revision 2, because it's not even as good as the 3090 Ti. It comes up short in this. This 4080, this should be a 3095 or something like that. 3095. And then the 4090, this should be a 3095 Ti, because that is how the pricing looks. and price to performance. That is the biggest problem that is coming out of this. We are not getting a performance uplift generation to generation. We're getting a performance uplift with an even worse payment increase. That is the biggest problem. And that is why it's not a generational jump. It's just an extension of the current stack. And that is the biggest problem I have with the 40 series right now. So thanks for sticking around for my rant. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll have more in the future.